Okay, hey everyone. I'm Cynthia Shepherd, and I had the pleasure of creating a digital painting of the Greek goddess Athena for the cover of this month's issue of Imagine FX magazine. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through the process of how I painted it step by step. So, first off, I created some thumbnail images, which I'm going to flash up on the screen here. I did these in pencil in a sketchbook, which is a personal preference of mine because working small in pencil tends to keep me from going too detailed too soon, which can kind of happen with digital. And I can just focus on the basic pose and composition. And then from there, I took the pencil drawings into Photoshop and embellished them a little, dropped them into the cover template provided by ImagineFX to make sure that they would fit the framing and not be like cutting anything off or overlapping too much. And then I took 4 of these rough sketches and submitted them to the editors, and we decided to go ahead with this last one. So before moving on to the sketch, I shot some reference photos. I only work on a single monitor, so throughout the video you're going to see these and other references on the screen for pretty much the entire duration while I'm working. It's sort of a back and forth between, observing and working visual information into the piece as I go along. As I start on the sketch, I've got a modified version of my thumbnail grayed out in the background to work on top of. The image is going to change a lot throughout the whole process as I correct for things like anatomical inconsistencies or as the editors give feedback to incorporate. Like, for example, I started with the intention of adding this tapestry behind Athena on one of her sides, and it didn't quite work out with the cover format. So we continued the columns wrapping around behind her instead, and eventually I added a statue and like a frieze to the background to work with the theme. But the basics of the composition will kind of remain the same. Okay, so you can see that I'm starting in black and white, which is how I typically start pieces. Sometimes I'll use close to monochrome or just a little bit of color, but for this piece I'm just starting in black and white. I'll deal with color later. And I'm starting with these outlines because that's going to define where my hard edges go eventually. It's sort of a guideline for that down the road. I'm going to speed up the sketch so that you can kind of see it from start to finish, and we'll go through adding value and color in just a minute. So hang tight and we'll just go through the whole process little by little. So at this point, now that I have all of the lines where I want them, more or less, I'm going to start adding value. And so I'll do that by creating a layer underneath the line layer to start with. And I'm just going to go in with my lights and darks and put the basics around where I generally want them to go. We'll get into the more specific later. It's sort of important to work from general to specific in all aspects of the painting, but this will just, again, be sort of like a rough guideline for where I want the highlights and the shadows and stuff to be later. So I'll continue speeding up the sketch so you can watch it evolve, and we'll come back for color. Alright, so now I'm going to start adding color, and I'm going to do that by beginning with just a layer set to multiply, and just doing like the basic warm and cool structure. And then I'll go in over top of that with both normal multiply layers, and I think I use some screen in there too. We'll see in a minute. And this will just give me the basic, this is not going to be the finished look of the color, but it's, again, a roadmap for later. Everything that's done now will eventually be completely painted over. So this is still very much the planning phase, but very, very essential in getting everything mapped out for later. Alright, so what you're seeing here is the finished color rough. After the colorizing phase from last time, I turned the sketch into the editors and we kind of went back and forth on where to go next. And they fed me some suggestions like, let's make her hair a little bit more auburn, let's take out the tapestry. And so I modified a few things to where it is now. And so I'm going to start on the background, which is usually it's usually a good place to start. And normally I would pull references for this landscape that I'm working up in the back, but I actually very recently did a similar kind of piece, so the kind of colors of the gradients in the background, or the way that the mountains fade into the land, fade into the sky, and all that are sort of top of mind. So I'm just going to kind of wing it and suggest the background for now, and maybe I'll grab some references later, maybe I won't. The important thing is really not to worry too much at this point about being super careful. I'm painting right over top of the stuff in the foreground, and that's okay because we're going to come back into that later, and it's a sort of a back and forth process. But this will give me a good background to start from, and I'll start making some more final color decisions here that'll carry through the rest of the piece. So I'm going to keep going with that, and you'll see the landscape start to shape up here in a minute. Okay, so you can see I've got my figure reference open again because we're about to start on the foreground. And this is kind of where the magic really starts to happen. This is where I come in with the first opaque layer on the face, the hands, the dress, basically everything we didn't cover in the background. And then from there we'll work around the whole piece again. Now, something I wanted to point out while I'm working on the face is you can see the references to the right, and you can kind of tell where some of the information is coming from, but it's very much a combination of the actual photographed human face and the cast, the plaster head that's there. And I'm taking information from both of those and sort of combining them in my head and then painting those onto the face, just so that, you know, she has Athenian sort of features rather than looking directly like the photograph. So it's important to make those kinds of decisions too. You know, you don't have to copy exactly what's in front of you. You can take liberty with changing some things around as long as everything stays proportionate and, you know, generally realistic looking. You can get away with a lot of variation. So at this point, after the first pass of paint on the foreground, it was time to give the editors an update again because it's a back and forth process, and we made some decisions. We decided to flip the cover horizontally from what we originally had it because it just fit better with the layout. And that kind of thing can happen, you sort of roll with it. It actually ended up looking a lot better, in my opinion. And I also, since we took out the tapestry and everything, I had to make some decisions after the sketch about what to add around the piece to keep it visually interesting and to, keep it with the warrior battle theme. So, one of the coolest parts of the piece for me was the statue. And one of the challenges was taking this lovely model and making his skin look like marble. And so in order to achieve that effect, I had to be very conscious of keeping highlights in the dark areas because, the surface of the marble would reflect the environment more than human skin. So I was sampling color from the sky, like keeping some of the blue from the sky in those shadow areas. And that really, I think, helped achieve that effect. So in the final stages of the painting, I'm just going through and adding smaller details. Here with the embroidery, this is kind of a neat effect that I like to use on fabric. You basically just draw with one solid color where you want the embroidery thread to appear. And in this case, I'm doing kind of a leafy fern pattern, and basically just get that all down and then paint along with the highlights and shadows of the fabric where it's rippling to kind of give it an effect of looking like it's on the surface of the fabric. It's following along all the same highlights and shadows. And then we're just going to go through some of the final details of the jewelry and the fabric and things like that just to take it through to the finish. I really hope you enjoyed this video and that you'll check out the workshop in this month's edition of ImagineFX and a lot of the other cool stuff in the magazine and on the DVD. I've always got great stuff for you. So hope to see you again, and enjoy! Happy painting!